I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. Those are the words of the man who designed the modern American education system, John D. Rockefeller. But how much power did he actually have over its creation? And is he still exercising it from the grave? Let's mine deep. At first glance, the American education system seems to be about exactly that, education. And this was true, at least before the end of the 19th century. That's when it caught the eye of the wealthiest American in history. Rockefeller monopolized the oil industry at the height of the Industrial Revolution, employing tens of thousands of factory workers in the process. But as demand for oil grew exponentially, he needed more workers who would be good at doing laborious, repetitive tasks without protest. So what did he do? He founded the GEB, the General Education Board, and did something that served for only the rich. He started throwing money at his problems. Adjusting for inflation, the GEB spent over $4 billion to pay for Americans' education. And in exchange, Rockefeller gained a lot of influence over the way in which people were educated. And with some extra pressure from other organizations, including the actual KKK, education in the United States became a mandatory state-controlled service. But what was it serving? The individual or the state? While creating factory workers may have had some very real benefits during the Industrial Revolution, times have changed. And we're starting to see cracks in the Rockefeller-backed standardization of the education system. The United States isn't even in the top 10 education index across countries in the world, with only 20% of 8th graders meeting US civics proficiency standards, the lowest rates ever recorded. We're teaching kids out of 40-year-old textbooks that retail the same as a lower-end iPad, where you can actually run real physics simulations. And that's not mentioning the cafeteria food and nutrition offered at public schools, which almost makes you wonder how many of the lights are kept on upstairs in little Jimmy's head.
Jimmy! This is no place for you!
So why should you care? Because once we're done sending our children to these factory worker training facilities, we then tell them to go spend $50,000 to $500,000 for another 4 to 8 years of education, regardless if they know what they want to do for a career yet. Ever see those TikToks of people breaking down in their cars? Yeah, they've been scammed. Not by Uncle Madoff, but by Uncle Sam. So why has the education system not changed at all in 100 years, despite occupying the century marked by the most technological advancement in history? Is it because everything's going great on the educational front and there's no reason to rehaul it? Or has an entire complex been built around it with the incentive to keep it in stasis? From teachers' unions to textbook publishers, care programs, and more, all aligned in various levels of bureaucracy to maintain stable, predictable outcomes instead of risking their job security in favor of technological progress. It's hard to say, but one thing is certain. If it wasn't for Rockefeller, education would look a lot different today. Some people in America are pioneering their own path, and the government isn't happy about it. Don't miss Corey DeAngelis Backstage.
In the current system, we have more indoctrination than education happening in the government-run schools. And, you know, for a long time, we haven't made a lot of progress on this issue, but with COVID and the school closures and families getting to see all the problems with the current school system, families who thought that their schools were okay started to see that there's something else going on that's not measured on standardized tests, which is whether the school's curriculum aligns with the family's values. And so there's been a mass exodus from the school system already, but the good news doesn't stop there. We've been pushing and passing school choice legislation in the form of something called education savings accounts, allows the funding that would have followed you to the government school into a savings account directed by the parent, and you can use that to escape the school system too, to go to private school, to go to charter school, or to even go to home-based education option providers like micro schools, or what people were calling pandemic pods over the past few years.
But coming from a private school myself, the issue's still there though. Obviously, that's a good solution to the problem, but going for 10 years down the line, are schools going to, I'm not saying they're going to disappear, but how do you see them that they're going to be?
Yeah, look, the supply of education providers is not fixed. So just because there's a lot of private education providers that might have woke ideology in the classroom today Doesn't mean it's going to be that way once the money follows the student and you have 1,000 flowers blooming. Parents usually don't want that crap. And so when you have more education providers opening up, you'll have more schools that just focus on basic education, or at least have values that are more aligned with parent values on average. And this is another good reason why we've moved from the voucher idea, where you could literally only use that ticket, the funding, to pay for private school tuition and fees. That doesn't really shake up the market as much as something like an education savings account, where you can use that funding for homeschool curriculum, for private tutors. You can start a micro school. So it really opens up the education market much more than the basic voucher idea that was proposed by Milton Friedman back in 1955.
So you think in the future people are going to be more homeschooled, and with this program they're going to have the ability to choose to hire the curriculum, hire the teachers and everything on their own?
Yeah, look, part of the problems with the school system is that it's a one-size-fits-all monopoly, but the other problem is that it's the factory model of schooling itself. And so, yes, with the education savings account, I think families are going to see that they can cut a lot of costs as well with these micro schools. You have 5 to 10 children together in a household. You can economize on the process of homeschooling and cut out a lot of the fixed costs in terms of building a new private school, and also paying all these administrators who make over $500,000 a year and do basically nothing. You can get more of that money directly from the consumer of education, the parents and their children, directly to the teachers. The teachers can benefit too. They can make more money, have a fraction of the class size, and have a lot more autonomy than they have in the structured factory model school system. And guess what? The kids are going to learn a lot quicker, and they'll be less anxious, and there's a lot less bullying and drugs and gang activity. There's a lot of negative forms of socialization that happen in these large factory model schools that parents are understanding. I mean, ever since the school closures started in March of 2020, we've done surveys since April and every month since, asking, how do you feel about home-based education now relative to before the pandemic? Every single month, the parents responded that they're now about 4 times as likely to say that they're now more favorable towards homeschooling as opposed to less favorable towards homeschooling than before. So this is all good news. People are voting with their feet. Census Bureau has already showed that the homeschooling population in the U.S. has at least doubled since pre-pandemic levels. So we're all moving in the right direction. I think we've reach something I call escape velocity when it comes to education freedom. Parents have woken up and they're never going back to sleep. And that's going to help us win on other policy issues as well, because you have fewer kids being indoctrinated to like big government policies in government schools. You'll see a trickle effect on the rest of the economy.
So now I have to ask you, aside from homeschool and everything, let's say you went out to dinner with Satoshi Nakamoto, what is one thing you would ask?
What is his views on education savings accounts? There's a little bit of overlap here. You can see Bitcoin as kind of the competition in the market for money, and school choice is kind of competition in the market for education services. So there's some overlap, and I would like to hear more of his thoughts on that specific policy proposal.